Mic is on?
Yes, it is.
Okay, it's 1 o'clock and I'll call today's meeting to order. We have an agenda in front of us. Does anybody have any additions to the agenda? Seeing none. Motion to accept the agenda as presented. Councillor Phillips?
Motion.
All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. So we'll move right into 3.1, delegations. We have Ms. Vasello and Mr. Tim Morehouse via electronic. So I will give you a minute here to get them
All right.
live here, and then I'll turn the floor over to them.
Andrea, will you need to share a screen or just speaking?
Just speaking.
Okay, great. I
Okay.
will let you take it away.
Welcome.
Great. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Mayor, Your Worship, and honorable council members. I'm here to introduce Mr. Tim Morehouse today of Morehouse and Associates, who conducted the wider all ages social needs assessment. So without further ado, I will let him take it off. Thank you so much, Tim.
Well, thanks, Andrea. And yes, good afternoon, Mayor Burke and members of council. And thank you for taking time in your agenda this afternoon to go through the social plan for the region. The slides that you have in front of you were really for a longer presentation that will happen tomorrow with all the agencies and organizations. So I will be referring to some of the areas, and some I'll skip over because I realize we have some time constraints that we need to pay attention to.
The slides?
Everybody has the slides in front of them, so we're good. We're good. Thanks. Yeah, go ahead. Mr. Morehouse.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So I'll actually, with that in mind, go right to slide 5, which is the study process. And I should mention that I'm representing two other folks today, Rob Parks with RC Strategies and Christopher Cameron with Objective Research and Evaluation. The three of us were the consulting team that worked on the project with Andrea. So in terms of the process, we looked at the community, and in the report itself, there's some demographic and social analysis information. We did a fairly exhaustive document review and resource review. Did some interviews with agencies and organizations. I think in all we had between the two surveys, the seniors survey and the social assessment, had in the order of 60 different conversations. And then some individual meetings in addition to that. The community surveys for the seniors were about 313 responses, and for the general residential survey, 359 responses. So a pretty good uptake in terms of the survey information and the resulting information it provided. The slide 6, research findings, the first set relates to the seniors survey. So in that survey, one of the big areas, as you can see, we like to make sure that we also identify the strengths that people find within their community, within their neighborhoods. Often these reports can focus on things that aren't present and weaknesses or gaps. But people also like to talk about what they find are the strengths of their community. In relation to seniors, the rural setting was a big reason that people found that they lived in the area in Clearwater. and a variety of recreation and social opportunities, welcoming and good neighbors, community spirit and pride. So these are all things that people told us that they were the reasons really why they lived in the region and things they enjoyed about the region. The other thing we like to do is get a sense of people's perception of their quality of life. It's often surprising, I think, again, when we're focused on issues and gaps and things that maybe aren't as good as people might want them to be, to bring forward the sort of quality of life measures. And in this case, when we look at quality of life, if we put the happy and very happy together with their quality of life, that's over 77% of seniors. And the unhappy or very unhappy is around 4%. So in the grand scheme of things, these are actually pretty impressive numbers. People are pretty happy with their quality of life in the region. In terms of the seniors survey, so top 5 priorities we asked people to identify. The first was personal safety, and when we look at that, we look at it in 2 ways. One is actual personal safety in terms of crime against people, those kinds of things, but also perceived personal safety. So there, for 61% of the respondents, that was their number 1 concern. Affordable housing, mental health supports, lack of in-home supports, basic needs not met. These are some of the things that the seniors were telling us were of concern to them or were important to them in their living in the community. Moving to the community survey, so this is the broader community. This was a residential or a resident survey that was sent out to households, and they completed online. So again, personal safety was one of the things that people brought up as being important to them. Mental health supports, lack of employment, some local services being too expensive, lack of community connectedness, affordable housing. So these are the things that people identified as things that are important to them in terms of their lives in the community and their lives in the region. We go to slide 10. So these are selected research findings. So things that people would like to access in the community that they now leave the community to access. Specialist medical appointments was the number 1 that people would like to see in the community. And that connects somewhat to transportation and the fact that to go and get some of these specialist appointments that's into Red Deer, if you have transportation, that's great. If you don't have transportation, that has some issues related to it. Affordable housing, a detox or treatment center, homeless shelter, and suicide prevention supports. So again, some of the things that people would like to access in the community instead of having to leave the community to access. We did a separate youth survey, and certainly was made more difficult because this occurred as COVID was building up, and schools were, a lot of students were not at schools, so the normal process of accessing students through the schools wasn't really possible. So we worked through the agencies, got surveys out to students who again were able to give their responses online. We worked through the street school and the contacts there. So got a fairly good response. And again, specific to youth, in terms of the quality of life or perception of quality of life in the community, if we put the very happy and happy with their quality of life together, we're looking at 69% of youth who have that perspective. And the unhappy or very unhappy, we're down at about 8%. We've done work like this in numbers of communities in Alberta and British Columbia. This is actually a fairly high number. Youth tend to be a little less enthusiastic about their community and what's going on in their community. The fact that 69% of the respondents said, yeah, they think they have a pretty good quality of life is actually quite encouraging. So if we go on to the conclusions, from the demographic information, the population of seniors is increasing. There's a trend line there and is projected to continue to increase. Seniors are generally happy with their quality of life. There are a lot of programs and services that are available, but the availability in terms of access, transportation, can be an issue, as well as awareness. So ensuring that people are aware of those services and programs. The main issues that the seniors assessment identified were transportation, loneliness and isolation, mental health, and in some ways those two can go together. The need for affordable housing, affordability of services, and personal safety. These conclusions come from putting the demographic information, the document and resource review information, the interviews, and the agency information together. So that's what seniors were telling us in terms of what their main issues were and things that they would like to see addressed. In terms of the social assessment, so the wider community, the things that sort of rose to the top in terms of priorities were employment and job training, housing and homelessness. We heard a number of comments that there is rental accommodation available, but it can be costly and a lot of times it gets taken up very quickly. Drugs, substance abuse, and addictions, mental health supports, and that was focused on youth and seniors, but also mental health supports in the next one talks about relationships, so mental health supports aimed at families and relationships within families. Violence and bullying, and interesting here that it wasn't the top concern, which it is in a few communities, but it was a concern in both the youth information that was generated as well as the general residence survey. Families and domestic violence, isolation and loneliness, which kind of mirrors the situation with seniors. It also is somewhat dependent on the current situation with COVID as well. Basic needs, food security, personal safety, agency interaction and connectedness, and lack of community connectedness. So the agency interaction and connectedness is really a measure of how agencies work together to provide seamless programs and services so that you don't have to go from one agency to another to get the services you need, this sort of wraparound approach. And community connectedness is really about do you know your neighbors? Do you know where to go to get services? Neighborhoods that work. We heard a lot about the Market on Main as a place that people can gather and connect and get together as a community. So quickly, in terms of the implementation of the report, we're recommending that there be a launch event, which would be a session to bring all of the social serving agencies and organizations together in the region, become familiar with the findings of the report, but also do some planning, some forward planning, in terms of a particular priority, the strategies, who comes together to work on it, and how does that move forward. Some form of implementation committee or working group that would be responsible for moving this plan forward over time. The time horizon is sort of 3 to 5 year minimums. So it's going to take someone who's watching the results and moving it forward and providing that encouragement. Encouraging organizations to put this plan into their own priorities and their strategic planning, and then some processes of review. Both review back to the community in terms of successes moving forward, but also review by the 3 councils in the area to make sure that there's lots of information on what's working, what's not working, and what assistance might be required to help things move forward. So I think I'll leave it at that and just look at any questions there might be. I'd like to commend the region, so the 3 councils involved, and certainly FCSS for undertaking this work. It's not as easy as some of the other areas of governance that councils are involved in. So a lot of value and a lot of credit for taking this on and developing a plan to help with decision-making moving forward. So at this point, I'd like to see if there were any questions and answer them as I can.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. I'll turn it over to Councillor Alderson.
Can you hear me okay, Tim? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so my question is just about awareness. Working with Andrea, I'm sure you know that we have a great connection between all the organizations through the Clearwater Interagency Group. Andrea has done a great job of just getting all these groups together, and still there seems to be lack of awareness, despite the fact that we try to promote it as many ways as possible. Did you find that there's a way that we could be promoting it better, or do you think it's just it's going to change with time? The more that we getting awareness out there, you mentioned that something like Market on Main has a lot of recognition because it's like a physical location that people go to. All these other things, they do have locations, but it's not quite the same thing. Even though a lot of these agencies have been around longer than something like Market on Main. So is it just lack of time, or is it something else?
Right. No, really good question, and thank you for that. So, as you suggested, Andrea and the interagency groups work really well together. There were lots of comments about the level of collaboration. Our suggestion would be sort of taking that a step further. So where interagency groups tend to be information sharing, moving that to a process of either planning for some of these priority areas, so taking one of them, mental health services for youth as an example, and through the interagency or through a separate group that may be a group identified to work on that through this plan implementation, focusing the interagency folks on what could be the things that could happen there. 2 challenges that you have as a region is that there are 3 sort of municipal entities involved, plus the First Nations that surround the municipalities. So bringing that focus rather than individually, I think would be helpful. And the other challenge is just that sense of communication beyond knowing what each other are doing and being able to talk about a family or a person and surround that person with kind of wraparound services. We know there are challenges in terms of getting around FOIP and anonymity in terms of services, but taking that on in a way that, 3 agencies could sit down and say, well, we have this group of folks, we're offering these services, they need these other things, we need to connect them to you. What's the best way to do that?
Thank you.
Tim, I have a question. You talked about concerns that there weren't enough suicide prevention supports. And there was another one. Medical specialists. So I'm just wondering what kind of information is given back to citizens that sometimes that's not even possible. Like some of the specialists that they have to be sent out to, it's not possible. Some are locating here to do, one day every now and then, but some of the specialists that needed to be seen, it's just not possible to get them into the community. So therefore that tells me it's the transportation then, that piece that's really the issue. So what kind of information is given back, specifically the suicide prevention? I'm assuming, I thought we had suicide prevention workers in our community. Can somebody clarify that for me? Because that's a bit alarming
Yeah, I'll certainly make comment, and then perhaps Andrea can speak more specifically as well. A couple of things. One, I think this concern surfaced because there have been some more or less recent suicides in the community, so it's kind of top of mind as well. And I think you're quite right. There is a level of service that can be provided by agencies and organizations in the community. We had some good conversations with the Health Network and the sorts of things that they do and are able to do. But there is a limitation too, and at that point, I think you do have to engage specialists outside the community, and it does become a transportation issue, and it becomes an issue of people sort of finding the entry in to be able to be referred to those specialists outside the community. So again, that connection at the local level that can be facilitated then by moving people to where those services are available. Andrea, anything else to add to that?
Yes, thank you. Your Worship, I would like to add that just before COVID happened, we actually had scheduled a presentation by the Center for Suicide Awareness and Prevention out of Red Deer. And they specialize in suicide prevention, awareness, and initiatives. So I think that is definitely a need. And also there have been recent cases, as Tim touched upon. Even just yesterday, I was in a homelessness meeting, and the Alberta Health Services team, they talked about that there's been an increase. Since COVID, I mean, folks are just getting to the end of their ropes and their resources are running out. So I do think that it's high in this area. And I remember Tim from the Primary Care Network, he shared statistics also that compares us to the provincial average. So we are higher than average. So we are getting those outreach services, but beyond just mental health, Alberta Health Services and counseling sessions, there's nothing specific to suicide. So I think that we could work on that.
Okay. Who do people call right now? I guess that's my concern now, is this, especially during these times right now and going into the holiday season, where is the number, where are the supports listed for people to contact?
There's a lot of supports. There's many crisis lines. They can call the local mental health professionals, burden bearers, etc. It's just there's a lack of awareness of those programs and services. So people really need to take the initiative and reach out, which we're always encouraging. But sometimes by the time people pick up the phone and contact FCSS or other providers, it's often really late and they're in crisis mode. So just trying to spread that education and awareness. Hey, here's the information. Keep an eye out for your neighbors, friends, and family. Maybe you don't need it, and there's no shame if you ever do need it, but reach out if it comes to that point.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Alderson?
Yeah, I don't know if either of you know the answer to this, but just wondering, with lack of transportation, with some specialists being outside this community, and maybe somebody doesn't have family and friends, is that something that can be taken on by volunteers, or is that an insurance issue then, or is that just a Good Samaritan that's able to do that?
or different agencies.
Yeah.
We do have agencies. It just sounds to me like it's an awareness campaign more than anything right now.
Sorry, I missed that. Could you just reiterate what Councillor Alderson said, Your Worship?
Just an awareness campaign. We're wondering about the awareness. How do people find out about all of the agencies that are providing transportation in our community? And suicide prevention. I believe this really does need to be brought forward quickly. So.
Yeah, there certainly are transportation resources as well, including West Country Family Service Association and the various lodges, even the Boys and Girls Club. And there's more than that. It's again, just that awareness. And I think that really came through in the report.
Okay. Councillor Fraser.
If I could add to that, Madam Mayor, a lot of the responses that we got back weren't focused on the large transportation solutions. So, having a municipal bus or something like that. They were looking for those smaller transportation solutions. So, friends and family first, and then sort of working up the scale until you have someone in place who has a responsibility as a driver with an organization to transport people. And yes, there are certainly, insurance and risk management things to be considered, but I think there are more organizations now that are finding ways to do that than there had been in the past. And I believe you're quite right. It is an awareness of what resources are available, and is that meeting the need, and if not meeting the need, then how can those be built upon?
Okay, thank you. I have two more questions before we wrap it up here, and Councillor Fraser.
Yeah, I was just thinking on the suicide prevention, just because we know the holidays are really hard. I'm wondering if it might make sense to do a campaign on Christmas and do, I don't know, something like 12 days of mental health and 1 day is suicide prevention, and you can do a post that lists all the different numbers for the area and the different resources, or, connection, if loneliness, here's the burden bearer's number, here's just kind of bringing it top of mind, having a place where they know, hey, I know that they posted some of those resources, I can go back, you're not calling anyone out. And with the holiday season, that might be good to get that information out to people in a way that's maybe less threatening than here's like 100 different pamphlets to go through.
Okay. Did you both hear that response?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thanks.
I did, Your Worship, and Councillor Fraser, thank you for that. I know right away what comes to mind is our FCSS Facebook page. We have quite a few followers, and Rebecca, the FCSS coordinator, has been really working hard to share some great content. So I'll toss that idea out to her, and she could always add that in. I know she's been sharing it. It's almost information overload at certain points for people, especially right now with all the changing restrictions and printed materials, but I think it's great. I don't see any harm in doing the 12 days of mental wellness.
Okay, and I have one more question from Councillor Narang.
No, I'm fine.
You're good?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so seeing it's 1:30 now, and I want to thank you for your presentation, and we look forward to more awareness then.
Thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you. Bye for now. Okay, so we'll move on to 4.1. The adoption of the previous minutes. Did you have a chance to read those? Just looking for a motion to accept, please. Councillor Alderson? All in favor? Carried, thank you. Moving on to number 5.1, delegation business. So just looking for a motion, I guess, to accept this report as information. Can we accept all of them? The social master plan, or just the delegation presentation? Just one?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Motion to accept. Councillor Fraser?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. No old business. Moving on to number 7.1. Hi, Ms. Hartling, and I'm going to turn this over to you. It's the Clean Energy Improvement Tax Bylaw.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. Guess I can take this off now. Following Council's direction, we started working on a PACE program, or a Clean Energy Improvement Tax Program. In the RFD, I've provided a timeline that kind of highlights some of the milestones of the program and where we are thus far. Back in June, we applied for a grant through the Green Municipal Fund, which is under the FCM. They came back to us with some questions, and we submitted a reapplication just addressing some of those questions. More recently, here in November, they came back. Or initially, we had gone for, it was the loan guarantee grant with some funding to assist with some of the program costs related to the implementation of the program. They've since come back and they felt the loan guarantee was an inappropriate kind of program for a PACE program. And they've made some recommendations, one of them being that we go into a loan with the FCM following the first 4 years of the program. We've been working very closely with MCCAC, or Municipal Climate Change Action Center, and I've invited Steve Atoni and Carly Beaver to attend today's session to answer some of Council's questions. They've been working even more closely with FCM. We've provided some of the workbooks and some of the options in the Council package, and Carly and Steve will speak to some of those. So I would like to actually introduce Steve and Carly to Council.
Hello.
And I'm going to turn this over to Carly.
Welcome. Good afternoon.
Thanks, Renee. Good afternoon. We did put together a presentation for you, so I'm just going to share my screen with that. There we go. And I'm actually going to turn it over to Steve to start.
So let us know if you can see the presentation and everything is working.
Yeah, we can see the presentation.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, Your Worship, and to Council, and thank you to Renee for allowing us to come and speak to the program today. We've been working hard with Renee for probably over a year now to get this program up and running, and we're getting really close. So we're excited to provide an update today. So maybe just go to the next slide, Carly. And we thought we'd start just by giving some background context on what Renee was talking about, which is basically in June 2020, we actually submitted a funding application, or the town of Rocky Mountain House submitted a funding application to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities in their community agency financing stream. And the town applied for a partial loan guarantee, which would backstop the line of credit that's being accessed through ATB. And at the time, this was a viable option in FCM's application booklet. So the real big benefit, in addition to the partial loan guarantee, was the fact that the town would be able to access a grant, a one-time grant that's given to the town for $560,000. And it would have some pretty important benefits. It would cover all the administrative staff costs for the town with regards to the processing of the program, and also our staff time as the provincial administrator. It would also allow us to allocate funds towards marketing and engagement efforts, because the program is new and outreach is going to be important. And in addition, we can provide incentives for equipment upgrades to the residents of the town of Rocky Mountain House. And also, this is something that Renee strongly advocated for, was to build local capacity. So we'll actually use a portion of those grant funds to train a home energy advisor that'll be local to the town and residing in there. So since then, we received some feedback from FCM, very positive feedback about the application, saying it was a very strong application. And since reviewing it, they've come back to us with some feedback saying that the partial loan guarantee is maybe not an appropriate option for the type of program that we're implementing for here in Alberta. And the reason why they think that is because it's a property secured debt financing. The rate of default will be really low in the program, if any at all, and that's the experience we've seen in other programs across Canada. So they instead said, hey, even though the application spoke to the fact that you can apply for this product, since reviewing it, we actually think you should be applying to the other stream that's available, which is taking a loan. But given we've already kind of gone through this process, submitted all the application forms, they've since come back to us in working with Renee, her team, as an alternative solution, what they're calling the hybrid approach. And the hybrid approach would be the town can access their ATB line of credit, so that process would remain the same for the first 4 years of the program. After the 4 years are complete, and we know exactly how much financing has been loaned out, we would get a loan from FCM, and with that loan, pay off the line of credit. And then basically enter into a loan agreement with FCM for that remaining loan period. So this approach is not in the application form. It's a sign that, FCM, is trying to find a workable solution. But even though it's workable, and even though it's allowing the town to access the line of credit, and then also convert it to a loan, there's one remaining lingering issue, and it's the issue around early loan repayments. Currently, FCM, in their loan structure, does not allow for early repayments. But in Alberta's Clean Energy Improvement Program that'll be offered in the town of Rocky Mountain House, legislation allows property owners to pay off the loan at any time. So the issue around early repayment is what happens if the property owner pays off their loan early and then the town of Rocky Mountain House cannot use those funds to pay down the FCM loan. Basically, some interest charge would be accrued. We've communicated this to FCM as a big problem, and not just for the town of Rocky Mountain House, but also for other Alberta municipalities who submitted applications, which includes the town of Devon, and also include other municipalities that are looking to apply to the same funding stream. So to overcome this, FCM has come back again and said, okay, we recognize this is an issue. We don't want municipalities of any size to be incurring any interest costs. So they've come back with some proposed solutions, we'll call them, to make sure that there's no interest charges that are held by the municipality, which Carly will go into in further detail.
Thanks, Steve. So FCM, in discussions with the Municipal Climate Change Action Center, has proposed these solutions that may be workable for both the town of Rocky Mountain House and the town of Devon, as we applied for similar, we had similar applications go through their process. So the first solution is interest rate matching. So FCM has said that they will be able to match or beat the interest rate provided by ATB Financial. They're anticipating that their interest rates would be between 1.5% and 2%, and those would be fixed across the whole FCM loan term. So really low interest rates and fixed rates, which is really ideal for these long-term loans. The second solution that they proposed is a loan loss reserve. So this is very similar to the partial loan guarantee that we initially applied for. So there would be about 5% of the total loan amount. So based on what we're looking at for this program, approximately $50,000 would be available for program for the town of Rocky Mountain House to access in case of default by program participants. And then there's also the potential that this scope could be expanded to potentially cover any interest charges to the municipality that are incurred due to early repayments and those interest charges accrued with that FCM loan. So there's potentially a bucket of money available for Rocky Mountain House to make sure that any additional charges that would be incurred by the municipality can be covered by that. And then the third solution is flexibility in the FCM loan length. So instead of providing specific 5, 10, 15, 20-year loan ranges, they would be able to match the longest SEEP term length to their loan length. So there wouldn't be any discrepancy between the loan lengths between the SEEP loans that we're giving out through the program and the FCM loan that would be accessed by the town. And these solutions have been proposed by FCM and in conjunction with Renee and as well as the town of Devon, we've put forward a response to them just showing that these types of solutions would be helpful for each town to really look at this hybrid approach. And so FCM has gone back to look at what they can do to implement these solutions for the town. The last solution is something that they've proposed that can actually be done on the municipality side. So the municipality can charge participants a slightly increased interest rate compared to what FCM and ATB are providing. And this approach is widely used in PACE programs as well as in Canadian PACE programs in other jurisdictions. And this slight differential in the interest rate would generate revenue that would be placed into a program reserve to help offset any of those interest costs for early repayments or potentially defaults if that is required. So it would essentially be adding to that potential bucket of money to help have a reserve for the program. And FCM put together a loan mitigation workbook that both our team and the town of Rocky Mountain House staff have reviewed to kind of look at what is the risk of these early repayments and how would this interest rate differential really help mitigate that risk of potential interest rate payments. And we didn't want to go through a full workbook with you guys today on the call, but I just wanted to provide a little bit of context around what we kind of looked at in that workbook and the results of that. So these are illustrative interest rates that we use through the workbook, so they're not set in stone, but this just provides an example for what this interest rate differential would look like. So for example, if the town of Rocky Mountain House charged participants a fixed 3.5% interest rate for their SEEP loan, and ATB Financial was providing a line of credit at prime, which is around 2.45% right now, and FCM provides the loan at 2%. So for the first 4 years of the program, Rocky Mountain House would be able to place 1.05% of the interest collected into that reserve. So that's the 3.5% that they're charging the participant, and then taking away that 2.45% that Rocky would have to pay to ATB Financial. And after those 4 years, the FCM loan would come into play and that line of credit would be paid off through that loan. And then the town would be looking at the FCM loan with that 2% fixed interest rate. So in years 5 to 20, let's say, the town would be able to place 1.5% of that interest collected into that reserve fund and be able to offset any potential interest charges caused by early repayments of loans. And going through the workbook and working with Renee and her team, we've been able to look at the interest rate collected and put into that reserve would fully offset any early repayments that come through the program. It's likely that most loans will go at least 5 years, so interest charge will be collected for at least 5 years for the majority of loans and some up to 20 years. So the scenarios that we've built out in this workbook is really looking really positive for this reserve fund. And then we just wanted to highlight some of the benefits that we can see from the hybrid option. So the town is able to benefit from the flexibility of using a line of credit during those first 4 years, and then only take up the loan from FCM when that exact project financing amount is calculated after those 4 years. It then also opens up the availability of that line of credit to be able to offer more financing through that line of credit in years 5 and up. The fixed interest rates are then available for the life of the CEIP loans, so the risks associated with potential variable prime rates are eliminated because we would know that the FCM loan is 1.5 to 2.5% for the life of that loan. And then in that case, the town can also offer a fixed interest rate to participants, making the CEIP offering really attractive to participants because they know that their CEIP loan is going to be 3.5% for the entire term of their loan. And continuing with that, there's a few risks of declining that the FCM's hybrid option. So if we don't move forward with the FCM application process, we'd be unable to access that FCM grant of over $500,000, which would be used to cover administration costs, as well as we would lose the potential for incentives for training, as well as incentives for program participants. It would also likely decrease our marketing efforts just because there would not be as much administration fees to go around. In losing the FCM grant, we would have to introduce the program administration fee, which is outlined in legislation that is shared between the municipality and the program administrator. The amount is up to 5% of the total project cost can be put on as a fee to that participant. So it's unlikely that that program administration fee would be able to cover all the costs that we're hoping to do through which includes engagement efforts, marketing efforts, and incentives. And again, as I noted before, we'd likely look at a variable rate if we continue with that line of credit to make sure that any fluctuations in prime are covered. And that's really uncommon in PACE financing programs. We usually look at financing rates for the terms of the loan. So that could impact participant uptake. So we wanted to give you kind of an update about launch timeline for the program. So we're anticipating launch for March 2021 to align with receiving that funding approval from FCM. That would include, or the risks to kind of launching before that would be that, as I said, a lot of the incentives, engagement, and marketing is reliant on getting that FCM grant or administration cost. So a lot of marketing information, like the inclusion of the incentives and things like that, would have to be adjusted if we did not get that funding from FCM. And there's potential that the application costs would increase as well if that FCM grant is not approved, just due to those additional program admin fees. So we just wanted to highlight the road to launching CEIP. So in December, we've been working on finalizing marketing and engagement plans, and we'll be looping in Renee and Laura on that plan, as well as finalizing our program agreements and program materials that will be available on launch. And then in January, we're hoping to receive FCM approval and then launch the CEIP website in mid-January, which will have a lot more information on the program available for participants and contractors and those who will be involved in the program. And that's when we'll also start our contractor engagement efforts to make sure that we have local contractors engaged in the program and ready to go once we do launch. Throughout February, we'll continue that contractor recruitment, do some information sessions with property owners to make sure they're excited and ready to go on the program, and work with the town of Rocky Mountain House to finalize any program processes. And then in March 2021, we'll look at opening intake for applications for Rocky Mountain House residents. And that's all I have for you guys today, so we can open it up to questions.
So I'll start. We've been first started looking at this since February 2019. And it seems to me it just keeps getting pushed out. And honestly, I feel there's just so much confusion with this right now that I'm not even sure which way we should turn. How much, like all of our administrative work that's been put into this now from the Town of Rocky Mountain House has been covered by the Town of Rocky Mountain House, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
So I really think we need to figure out how much more effort, it was exciting when we were going to be the first out of the gate, but it seems like we've kind of done all the work now, and it just seems like there doesn't appear to be a firm, definite date in sight. And I'd like to see firm, not like we hope to initiate it by March 21. That's 2 years beyond where we even started talking about it. So Councillor Phillips and then Councillor Alderson.
I have a few questions. So the loan amounts we're talking about, are they still going to be put onto the tax assessment? Like, is it still going to be collected through the tax assessment?
Yes.
Okay. So when that person is no longer on title for whatever reason, will it be actually part of the title of that property? So it'll be put on title?
It would be part of the tax certificate. We're writing into the agreements as well. I've asked MCCAC to write into the agreements that the responsibility for disclosure falls with the landowner. Carly, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
So nothing.
Yeah, and that's correct.
So nothing will be actually affixed as a KVA on title for that property then? It'll just be through the tax assessment?
No, that's right. We actually looked, I did ask them to provide some details on what other municipalities are doing across Canada that have a PACE program. And they found that there were, I don't believe there were any that were registering caveats on the property. It also creates some liability for the municipality if you miss a caveat. If it's written right into the agreement, the onus goes on the homeowner for disclosure. It is on the tax certificate, however. So.
One other question I had is when we're talking about the ATB prime rate, 2.45%, is that a floating rate or a fixed rate?
The ATB would be a floating rate.
Okay, so if we did perchance go with the 3.5%, interest rate as a fixed rate, what would happen if 3 years down the road if interest rates start climbing up and the prime rate jumps beyond 3.5%?
The municipality, so the FCM would be a set rate. So whenever transferring to that program, the rate with FCM would be set at the 1.5% or 2%. I'm really pushing for a lower interest rate, not a comparable interest rate with FCM. That's in my discussions with them. I've been advocating for that because there's got to be a benefit, I think, to us going to that rather than, keeping our funding from ATB.
Councillor Alderson?
Yeah, I guess kind of along Councillor Phillips' line of questioning. First, I want to say, I still think the idea of a PACE program is fantastic, but I just want to make sure I understand, and probably some viewers as well, how do these new options, so for the FCM hybrid options coming in, how do they affect us financially as a municipality compared to the initial option? So is this likely going to be more costly to the town or less costly with the new hybrid option?
I think overall the hybrid option would likely be less costly. I mean, I can't foresee, what the interest rates are going to be in 4 years, but I think with it's a stable rate. And like I said, we are still advocating for a lower interest rate than what's currently available. I don't see the interest rates going up anytime soon, but I certainly don't see them going, down as well.
So just a separate question, if no one else has. Why do the rules keep on changing during the application process? What is the reason behind that? It's pretty straightforward at first, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been a bit frustrating for us.
Yeah.
I don't know, Carly, if you can speak to FCM's decision as to the change. other than, they felt it wasn't the best, the loan guarantee wasn't the best option.
Yeah, so the town of Rockingham and the town of Devon both were one of the first municipalities to enter into the FCM, this specific offering from FCM. So they were calling it the Early Leaders Round, and it wasn't a pilot for them, but it was their kind of first go at this offering for PACE type programs. So I think on the FCM side, they've been kind of working through some of the details of their program as we've been applying and through this review process that they've been going through. So they're opening up another offering in February of 2021. So I think as they've been going through this process, they've been refining some of those details and realizing that, like this, that the partial loan guarantee isn't really appropriate for a PACE program, that they didn't really take into consideration, I guess, in that first offering.
Okay, I just want to clarify, I think the program's fantastic. I'm just frustrated with the length of time that it's taken to get off the ground, and my worry is that we're going to lose the excitement in this. People are just going to they're going to say, oh yeah, well, we've been hearing about this for 2 years now. When is it actually going to kick off? And I fear that we're going to lose some of the potential to the benefit of the program. So, Councillor Auld?
When we first started talking about this, the original program didn't affect our debt load. Does this change? Does that affect our?
No, it doesn't. So
It doesn't.
under the Municipal Government Act, it doesn't affect our debt load.
Your Worship, I just wanted to comment as to the excitement around the program. So I have been in contact and we've created a list, and I have had people on those lists regularly checking in, and I've been providing them with updates. I've also received a few inquiries, and as I receive an inquiry, I do add it to our list, because once we have some information that we can share, and once we start with some of the marketing around the program, that information will be shared with both the contractors and private individuals that will be getting started. So we have their contact information.
Yeah, and I know you guys have put so much effort into this. I just wonder, at what point do we maybe put a hold on it and wait until we see some other communities do it? Because I feel like we as a town, we're kind of working through the details. Is that beneficial, or should we kind of wait and let somebody else do all the work?
Your Worship, I think we're 5 feet from home base.
Okay, okay.
Or home plate, or whatever you want to call it. So it'd be our recommendation that we continue with our grant application with the FCM.
Okay.
Hopefully in January it's announced, and if it is announced, then we're off and running.
Okay. And if not, like if we don't realize they don't realize the March deadline that the hope is to achieve, at what point do we say, okay? Yeah. Councillor Fraser?
Now, before the grant had been created and was offered, we had all of our ducks in a row as far as the ATB. We had the program ready to go. We were working with MCCAC. I guess if the FCM grant doesn't come through, that would be unfortunate. $500,000 is a lot of money, but we are set up and prepared to run the program, I guess, locally?
So Your Worship, in reality, if we don't get the grant program, this program would not be feasible for our citizens because of the administration costs to get it off the ground.
Okay, and I guess my question is, what's a realistic goal for our administration that's working on this program? If it just, like say we extend the deadline now to June, at what point?
Your Worship, we can bring it back to council in beginning of February to give the status of the grant, and then council can make that decision.
Sure, okay. Is everybody good with that? Yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much for your presentation, Carly and Stephen and Renee and Laura. And thanks
Your Worship, I just want to comment that I've had feedback that our grant is very strong, and there is the previous EEA, one of the previous EEA program advisors is actually sitting on the committee for FCM. And I think there's, we've got some people in our court, so.
Okay. So,
And if I may add, oh, sorry.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I was just going to add, in terms of generating that excitement, if we, if the FCM hybrid approach does seem like a workable solution, things will start happening fast after the holiday break. As Carly mentioned, we are going to start that local contractor recruitment within the town of Rocky Mountain House. So excitement will build. We'll have a website launched in mid-January where residents can go in and view the details and start pulling information and even getting ready. So March is just when the switch goes on where people can apply, but way before March we'll have some market activity. Will be some news about the program and some ways for contractors and property owners to interact with the program.
Okay. Great, thank you. Councillor Alderson?
Yeah, and I think too, while there might be a few that are, get excited and go away, I think for most people, like these type of things are a way of life. It's not so much like a fad. So I think that, at least from the people that we've heard from previously, they're still excited about this stuff. And I was just going to make a motion,
sure,
unless there's more talk, that council, I suggest that we instruct administration to proceed with the hybrid option by utilizing the line of credit for the first 4 years of the Clean Energy Improvement Program, borrowing from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, FCM, after year 4 of the program, including any mitigation options available for the municipality.
Okay. Any other discussion before? Okay. All in favor of that motion? Okay, and that's carried. Okay, thanks again for your presentation.
Thanks, Carly. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye for now.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Council. So much work.
I know you guys are putting a lot of work into this. I realize that.
Your Worship, did you want a second motion for us to bring a report back at the beginning of February for council, and that way it goes on the action list? And
yeah. Okay, that's great. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you. That kind of gives us more of a, a deadline, and because otherwise I see this in the agenda all the time and I think, holy cow, we keep going back to this. So hopefully it's there. I mean, for the contractor's sake too, right? They're all excited about doing this.
Yeah, well, Your Worship, I really was pushing because it wasn't one of the things like an option within the grant program for us to train somebody locally, but I thought because of the change, if you recall going back, that initially we had kind of waived the pre and post audit requirements for residential, but under the FCM grant it's a requirement because of there's like a report that has to be done. So I really fought with them regarding like the need for the report and the cost of the report, and so they've come down in that and included that in the grant, or at least it's whether they approve it or not, but I really pushed for that to be included as one of the costs they would cover through the granting, as well as, I really pushed for us to have somebody locally trained. If that's going to be a requirement, we need to have somebody here that is going to be able to do those audits. And
absolutely, yeah, that's good. Good for you to do that because we have certainly more than capable people in this area to do those audits.
From the initial discussions, we fought to get those things out that would be barriers, and then going with FCM now, they've kind of put all those barriers back in place, and so everybody's found that workaround to be like, all right, if you're putting up these barriers, here's what we need to make it happen.
Okay, well, thank you for all the work that you're putting into this. Okay, thanks. So we'll move on to 7.2. And this is the Council and Members at Large Service Recognition Program Policy.
Yes, so at the December 1st regular council meeting, council asked administration to review the current Council and Member at Large Recognition Policy and provide some information as to costs and bring it back to council with the addition of what it would cost to add mayors to the policy. So I provided that information in my report. The cost of planting a tree per tree is $740. That would be the cost based on my conversation with Mr. Shanks with engineering. There were 4 changes to the policy. The first, under the policy statement, I changed some of the wording to kind of reflect the strategic plan of the municipality. Under council, in the policy, I added clarification that the policy applies to previous mayors upon application. Reference to the attachments, all the schedules, A through D, now form part of the policy, and the logo was just updated. This policy would rescind the previous policy.
Okay. I have a question about the plaque per tree, and if this is going to happen, like how many trees are we looking at for past? And if indeed it would be better to do one plaque for all, rather than have a bunch of plaques, just do one and have like maybe a memorial or a place, like a recognition place, rather than doing one plaque, one tree, all the way down. I mean, we know we have to plant a bunch of trees, and then perhaps, I've thought about this before, we have the photos of past mayors and the plaques of past councillors in here, but really nobody really looks at them, and I'm wondering if perhaps we should create a wall at the Christensen Sports and Wellness Center and move some of this stuff up there and where it can be viewed by the public. Councillor Alderson?
Yeah, I like that idea. For me, this was more about trees and less about plaques, although I'm okay with the past mayors getting recognition just because of the sheer amount of work that they deal with. But if we can be, if past can be recognized elsewhere, that's fine. Again, to me, this is more about the tree planting program in recognition of, so there's a reason for it, but then we can get more trees out there. And if we can cut down the cost, because the plaques are costly.
Yeah, they are costly, and I think I don't personally see one per tree, but anyways, that's just my thought. Does anybody have? Councillor Auld?
I think if we had one plaque that you could continually add each of the mayors on in a central spot,
Yeah.
and the trees are minor for as far as cost going forward. But I agree that having a plaque and a tree for everybody gets pretty pricey.
Well, I just don't know how many we were incorporated in 1913, right? So how many plaques?
So, Your Worship, you are our 15th mayor,
Oh.
but it's saying that we had 12 reeves before we had mayors.
Oh, wow.
So when we were incorporated as a village, we had council that selected a reeve. So it wasn't until 1929 that we instituted the position of mayor.
See, that in itself is interesting, and I think that, to me, is worthy of having that recognition on a wall somewhere that the public can realize, see the change in the government that we've actually already taken in this, or had in this area. Councillor Brown?
First off, I agree with the one plaque, but just clarification, I guess, from Mr. Krause. Isn't the tree and the plaque upon request?
Your Worship?
Yes, in the policy, I put it upon request for former mayors.
So maybe next to nothing.
Right. Councillor Alderson?
Sorry, just along that line of thinking, does the request have to be by a former mayor or anybody in the name of a former mayor? Because some former mayors are no longer with us. They can't make that request. So who would the request come from?
It would be like if a family member could request. Yes.
Councillor Narang?
Yeah, I actually like the plaques of the trees. Like when I'm walking around the trail and whatnot, I think it's a really neat historical part of Rocky Mountain Hill, so I actually prefer to have the plaques with the trees because you get to see, family names or different history, and I myself have gone and Googled people and I'm like, oh, who's this person? And so it just triggers me to do my own I think just makes it a little bit more interesting. So I like the plaques. I mean, whether or not you can request, yes, I want a plaque, or no, I don't, or add a cost to it or whatever, I think it's a nice little addition to the trail system in Rocky Mountain House to have them there.
Okay, good point. Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I just to follow up on that, that thought, I like the one plaque for those that came before the policy, and continue with the one plaque per tree going forward from the date the policy was implemented.
Okay, councils. You know, we have so much history in this community, and I would like to almost see something, I mean, this is more than this, but we need to celebrate our history, and this is a start. So, okay, so what are council's wishes then? Councilor Alt?
Can we bring back the discussion to do something different at, say, the Christensen Center for the history, and then just, so this is just focusing on the,
Going forward?
yeah. Is that-
The separate?
So, Your Worship, if I'm hearing Councillor Albright, it's a resolution that passes policy as presented, which was kind of a go forward. And then a second resolution asking administration to bring back a report on costing or ideas for a central place at Christensen.
Yeah, is that capture? Yeah. Okay. Are you making that?
I'll make it after.
Okay. Councilor Narang?
Yeah, I can make this resolution. Be it resolved that council adopt the council and members at large service recognition program policy as presented, directing administration to proceed with implementation. The recommended alternatives.
Okay. Any more questions on that? Okay. All in favor of that motion? Okay, and that's carried. Councillor Auld?
So I'd like to make a motion that administration brings back a report investigating the possibility of creating a central location for past recognition and history of the previous mayors and Reeves.
Bears and Reeves. Interesting. Okay. Is that?
Yeah, Your Worship, maybe we can have a date.
Well, nothing.
Before the election?
In January. January 1st? In March, whenever.
March,
no rush.
2nd, would that work for council?
Whatever works
For me.
for you.
Yeah, I'll even give you to the 9th.
It's like you guys were thinking the same. That's crazy.
Okay, is everybody clear on that motion?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. How are we
Thank you,
doing?
Your Worship.
Yeah, thank you very much
And
for
Merry
coming in.
Christmas to
You too.
everybody.
Merry
We'll see you
Christmas to
next year.
you, Renee. Take care. Okay, so we'll go to 3.3. 7, what did I say, 3.3?
Does somebody hit rewind?
I'll just put these back. 7.3, discussion. So we all received a letter, or I received a letter, it's in our package, around a discussion, Clearwater County is requesting that we meet with Minister Nixon. And some of the concerns are to meet with Minister Nixon and discuss Rocky Mountain House Airport's operations and maintenance, Rocky Mountain House Airport Commission roles and responsibilities, and the public engagement process regarding matters related to airport development and public concerns. So these sound fairly operational in nature, and I don't know that having a meeting with Minister Nixon, I don't know what Minister Nixon would be able to offer. So
Your Worship, just to follow up on that, last Friday I received a call from Mr. Windhorst. He's the Director of Market Access, Intergovernmental Relations and Policy Coordinations for Alberta Transportation. He informed he's seen all the emails and requests and matters that have been sent to Minister Nixon and have been provincial government. And he's reviewed them, and he's saying none of them are provincial matters. They're in the preview of Clearwater County and the town of Rocky Mountain House as the owners, and the town being the operator of the airport. He said the province's only role in airports is to provide a grant program through Alberta Transportation, and that is pretty much it. And asking him if he had any concerns, and he replied that the province does not. He said my emails to the stakeholder group have been forwarded to them, and he's reviewed them, and he says it looks like the town is conducting itself in an open and transparent way and working with the stakeholders, so the province has no concerns.
Okay.
Things got dry.
Yeah, I know Minister Nixon is obviously busy with many things at this time, mainly the pandemic and other issues that are going on. So I would certainly love to meet with Minister Nixon and the county, maybe Reeve Laird in the new year. Maybe we can discuss other issues from our area. So at this time, should we then send a letter to the county just expressing that at this time we are not going to meet with Minister Nixon to discuss the operation of the airport?
Yeah, thank the county for their letter, but the town has been contacted by the provincial government. They do not have a concern with the operation of the airport.
Okay, sure. Councillor Fraser, did you have?
I was just wondering if part of that, the declining of the meeting over the airport because the province has already responded on that, perhaps it would make it more concrete if we were to provide a list of provincial topics that Jason Nixon would have something to talk about us with, so that we can have an agenda if we're going to meet and not waste his time.
I guess we could, realistically, we could also give them an update of what's happening with the regional steering committee. And
If we're going to get it time and we're going to get his ear for a while, let's use it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, Councillor Brown?
Just a clarification from Mr. Cross again. So our response would have the Intermunicipal Affairs reply back to us in it. So with the provinces acknowledge that they're satisfied with the way the airport is being run, that would be part of our response to the county's letter?
Yes, that the province has reached out to us.
Okay, that's all I want to make sure.
Okay. So just a motion to accept or to send this letter to the county. And Councillor Brown?
I'll make that motion.
Okay. All right. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. How's everybody doing? Do we need a break or should we just go on a couple more here?
I'm good.
Do 7.4?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. The final Eco-Center report.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So as council's aware, we hired Sonavera to do a study and best practices for an eco-center for the town. In the past, all of these have come to council in the environmental task force meeting as technical memos. So now Sonavera has compiled it into one final report, and we're just looking for council to accept it.
Yeah, it's a great report. So
A lot of information.
a lot of information. Okay, council's wishes. Do we have any more? Councilor Fraser?
If there's no further questions or discussions, I'll move to accept the report as information.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? Thank you, that's carried. So we'll move on to 7.5.
That went way faster than I was expecting to get my 2 minutes. He's on his way.
Okay.
Do I need to? Yeah.
So
We just
Can we do one first and then,
Yeah, Your Worship, so looking at the agenda, it's
Co-op first.
co-op first, so.
so we have Councillor Fraser leaving and declaring a conflict of interest, or?
Yeah, pecuniary interest as it affects her employer.
Okay. Got that on, Marina? We'll call you back. Thanks, Councillor Fraser. Hello, Mr. Ment.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council.
I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so I'm before you today just to bring to your attention, we've received a couple requests in the last couple of weeks from a couple of our leaseholders at the Christensen Center, one being the Evergreen Cooperative Association that leases a space for their little sports store, and the Rocky Arts and Craft Guild that leases their pottery studio and space upstairs at the Christensen Center.
Mr. Ment. Oh, sorry.
No, Your Worship.
Can we just deal with
one at a time?
The co-op, Evergreen Co-op first, please, and then we'll have Councillor Fraser come back in.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So as I've indicated in my report, on December the 3rd, I received a letter from the general manager of the co-op, just requesting the town consider perhaps suspending the payment of their 2020 lease of the space at the Christensen Center. They were invoiced and had paid the 2020 lease amount prior to the start of the hockey season. With COVID obviously in place, they were unable to, and haven't opened. They actually removed all of their equipment and took it over to the co-op home store and have been operating it out of there. So that basically the space has been vacant. So their request is basically to consider, deferring the payment that they made in 2020 to 2021 and extending their lease by that additional year. From a financial side of things and conferring with our Director of Corporate Services, I believe the lost revenue could be recuperated through the MOST grant. I guess the recommendation that I would bring forward on that, from a financial, their lease amount is, $3,350 plus GST per year. So I guess my recommendation is that we would consider that. So.
It makes perfect sense to do this, so I really don't have much else to say. That, we can recoup these costs from the MOST grant, and this just makes sense.
So we want partners ongoing once we do this, so.
Yeah. Any other comments?
No, I agree.
Councillor Phillips?
There's no more discussion on it. I'll make a motion that council approve the request of the Evergreen Cooperative Association to defer the rent paid in 2020 to 2021 and extend the term of the current lease agreement by 1 year.
Yeah, awesome. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Okay, thank you. And I'll just give a minute here for Councillor Fraser to come back in.
Hopefully they can go back in here in 2021.
You have to have me back.
Okay, I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Ment.
Okay, yeah, the second request came in the form of a letter from the president of the Rocky Arts and Crafts Guild. And again, a little different. They do lease the space. Again, they did pay their lease for 2020 back in the beginning of the year. Their situation is that their major fundraisers, their annual craft sale in late November, early December was not able to happen. All their classes that they typically would run were not able to take place. So their request is that we would consider deferring their 2021 payment and extending their lease, which is due to expire in April of 2021, and just extend that by a year and give them some relief for their lease payment for 2021, since they haven't been able to do their fundraising, and it's a major fundraising for them paying their their lease amount. And they're not looking to go anywhere, so
Yeah.
and it's a matter of providing them with some financial relief.
Again, this can be recouped by most grant as well. And so this makes sense. We need these strong organizations again once we come out of this. So it makes perfect sense to me to approve this request. So any other conversation? No? Okay. Councillor Alderson?
I'll make a motion that council approve the request by the Rocky Arts and Craft Guild to defer the lease payment for 2021 and extend the term of the current lease agreement by 1 year.
Okay, awesome. All in favor of that motion? Good, that's carried. Thank you very much.
Short and sweet. Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. So, are we good to go to 7.6 or do we stress? Dean is right outside. One there right there? Yep. Okay.
Charlene.
Oh, it needs 30 seconds, so
Sure.
please bear with me.
I got 30 seconds.
See, this is where he could be.
Well, maybe have a quarter.
Hey, Dean.
Sorry, I'm just running it all from there.
That's Christmas present. Dean, there's a Christmas card for you on the way out the door.
Oh,
Just in your corner.
sure.
Okay, so we're on 7.6. The bylaw 2020-19 land use bylaw. We'll turn that over to you guys.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Just in front of Council today is for Council's consideration for first reading of bylaw 2020-19, the land use bylaw. In regards to the legislation and policy, we are and will be meeting all the legislative requirements moving forward. Under strategic plan, it does meet Council's, one of Council's goals that we set back in 2018 for a new innovative and pre-development land use bylaw. Communication and citizens engagement. Over the last 18 months, O2 and the town have had multiple meetings with developers, residents, interested parties that have wanted input into the land use bylaw process. They also have, in the last 6 weeks, we posted on the town website, sent out in emails to individuals to have comments regarding the LUB, and it'll still be on there until second and third reading in January as well. Public hearing of bylaw 2020-19 will be advertised in the local newspaper January 5th and 12th, as well as on the town website and social media sites. Just a few comments regarding land use bylaw. Town of Rocky Mount Host land use bylaw is to regulate the use and development of land and buildings in the town of Rocky Mount House pursuant to Part 17 of the Act. This bylaw strives to enable sustainable development based on the principles of the town, provide an overarching document to assist in the coordination of municipal bylaws, policies, programs, and investments. I have a couple of alternatives there. Questions?
I just have a quick question about the time. Are we pushing the time because of what's going on right now? January 19th?
I guess we've got to decide administratively whether we do a Zoom or go to a larger room possibly for the 19th meeting in January.
Yeah, Your Worship, we can't go to a larger room. We can't have, under the new restrictions, we can't have a big classified as a gathering. So it would either have to be electronically or we push it out.
So if we decide this today and we realize coming up to it that, how much notice do we need to cancel it, like to push it into February?
I'm not too sure. Mr. Kraus, do you know through the MGA if there's a...
Your Worship, so we meet on January 5th, and I think we've determined at that time to either postpone the public hearing or proceed.
Okay.
Makes sense.
We were talking about possibly in the advertisement putting information, like if you're interested in joining through Zoom, contact us ahead of the meeting or something like that. I don't know how that works through the MGA, but
How does that work?
No, Your Worship, you can still have a public hearing through electronic means.
Okay. Okay.
That was my question as well, so you just asked the same thing. I was just wondering if it was even possible, because I mean, we have people zoom in and give presentations like we're watching, but is it possible on the grander scale of the public? But if it is, that'd be great.
Yeah,
I think if there's interested parties that want to speak on the LUB, I think if we give enough notice and give them a Zoom invite, that's an option for them. Or, of course, they can write a letter to council in regards to the LUB.
Okay. Councilor Fraser?
I was going to say, they could probably also send a video of themselves reading the letter, so it doesn't need to be live.
right. Yeah, we can definitely make it clear in the advertisement to contact us and with different ways that they can be part of it.
Okay.
So if that's the case, is the 19th still a good date then?
It sounds like it is.
It's enough time.
Okay. Councilor Fraser?
I guess if there's no further discussion, I will move that council give first reading to bylaw 2020/19 and set the public hearing date for January 19th, 2021 at 1 p.m.
Okay. Everybody's clear on that? All in favor of that motion? That's carried. Thanks. Okay, so we'll go to 7.7. The MDP bylaw.
Okay, so this RFP is similar to the previous one. We're looking for council's consideration for first reading of bylaw 2020-20, the municipal development plan. We are and will be meeting all legislative requirements. Just an error on my part, land use bylaw 639, every municipality must pass a municipal development plan. I have land use bylaw there.
Oh, okay. Should be MDP.
Did you mean to put MGA?
What's that? Yeah.
You just didn't say what you meant.
Oh.
Okay.
So as far as council's strategic plan, it does meet some of our goal that we set. I said our goal, council's goal. Communication citizen engagement, similar to the previous one. O2 Planning Design had a communication engagement plan. We met with the public. We also had open a sounding board throughout the community for comments that we did in 2019. As well, we'll be doing a public hearing advertisement for 2020-20 in the local newspaper on the 5th and 12th, as well as town website and social media sites. Comments for the purpose of the MDP is to guide future growth and development in the town of Rocky Mountain House over the next 20 years.
Okay. Questions? Mr. Schrader, comments? Council's wishes? Councilor Fraser, or Councilor Phillips?
Starts with the same sound, isn't it? I'd like to make a motion that council give first reading to bylaw 2020/20 and set a public hearing date for January 19th, 2021 at 1 p.m.
Okay. No other questions? All in favor of that motion? That's carried.
Just a comment, I would like to thank my staff and as well as council for all their input into the LUB and MDP. It's been a bit of a process over the last 18 months, but hopefully we're getting there. So.
I think it was a great process, and you guys, it was great. I mean, you have had to handle all kinds of different open houses, and you've had to adapt. So thank you as well for all your effort, and I really do look forward to seeing this complete. So, Councillor Phillips.
Yeah, I echo that. This will put Rocky on track for the next decade or two in the right direction and allow for more streamlined use of our land use bylaw.
Yeah, there was many comments, positive comments at some of those open houses. So, and I've heard other people too make the comments. So that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to 8.1. Rocky Senior Housing Council Board request. Mr. Kraus, and then I guess Councillor Brown, if you want to discuss any of this.
Take it away, Mr. Carlson.
No, thank you, Your Worship. So they have submitted a letter to us requesting that we submit a joint letter to the province with the councils of Clearwater and Caroline. Most of what for was for the funding for COVID to go beyond March 2021. So they've been given funds up to date to help with COVID costs. There's no security to funds going in the next fiscal year.
Who is this letter going to? Is it going to the Minister of?
Minister Pond, probably.
Is it? Yeah, okay, maybe, hey?
Yes.
Minister Pond?
Minister Pond?
Is that who's in that position now?
It was Minister, it was Minister,
That office.
yes, okay. Okay. It seems like, I mean, if we can help them out, it's pretty logical.
It's well known that some of the people hit the hardest are these long-term care facilities, and there's no harm in writing a letter requesting something like that.
Yeah. Councillor Fraser?
Well, and the alternative is don't send a letter and it falls on municipalities and gets downloaded again for us to bear the cost of that. So at least to bring it forward to that minister so they're aware that there is, a need.
Yeah. Anytime we can support these agencies, I believe we need to be. So, and they need us right now, and I'm more than willing to send a support letter.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, I'll make that motion that we send a support letter what ministry is that?
We'll look it up.
Okay. We'll send a support letter for the Rocky Seniors Housing Committee.
Just for clarification, a joint letter, Your Worship, or just a letter from Rocky?
She does want a joint, doesn't she?
Oh, that's the request, but
Yeah.
I mean, each municipality can send their own too.
I wonder which is considered like a
More
stronger.
powerful.
Would it be better that we all send our own?
Caroline as well, because they also have housing in there that's
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So probably stronger with all three, Your Worship?
Together?
Together.
Okay. So should we reach out then? We could reach out to the county and Caroline, Village of Caroline, and get our names all on one. Okay. Sounds good. You have that motion, Marina? Okay. All in favor of that motion? Carried. Okay. Now we just have a motion. I just need a motion to accept correspondence for information. So 9.1 to 9.10. Councillor Alderson?
I'll make the motion.
That is information.
That's information for correspondence.
All in favor of that motion? Carried. Okay, it is 2:37 and I will call a 5-minute break.
And our mics are on, Mayor.
Okay, so it is 2:46 and I'll call the meeting back to order. We'll move on to the CAO report. Anybody have any questions for the CAO? Okay, just more. Councillor Phillips?
I'll make a motion to accept the CAO report as presented.
Okay. All in favor of that motion? It's carried, thanks. And we all have directors' reports in front of us, and the directors aren't in the room, so we just need a motion to accept the directors' reports as written. Councillor Alderson?
Make that motion.
All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Moving on to 11.1, we're at the action list. Anybody have any questions? Just on my last action item about administration to look into the savings realized by local commercial properties as a result of the change made to the town's solid waste program. I have a virtual meeting with the Chamber Board of Directors tomorrow, so I'm going to ask them as well if maybe they want to poll and find out too. So.
I've seen some different bins. I noticed like down a few alleys, like different colored bins. I'm wondering if there's like a couple new companies that have kind of jumped on maybe. I don't know, or maybe I'm just noticing them because I have garbage on my mind, but they did jump out, so I'm wondering if there's been.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good info. All right, it's just a motion to accept the action list then, please, as presented. Councilor Brown. All in favor? It's carried. Community grants list. This is still suspended, correct?
It is, Your Worship, but it is in the 2021 budget.
Right. So when should we look at bringing this back and opening this up again?
Your Worship, if council's okay, we'll just open it up. I think it's March intake. It's the first intake.
Perfect.
We should know by March how COVID's gonna either stay locked down or we should be able to figure that out.
Yeah. Councilor Alderson?
Also, just because there seems to be a lot of requests, Andrea does different intake times. There's usually 2 of them for FCSS, so maybe if we can offset them a bit. So for those that, because there's a lot of requests obviously that don't maybe come in, that still could potentially apply for these small grants. So maybe not during the same time, because then there's duplication of them as well. But maybe they can be offset slightly differently, although these guys can apply whenever. But.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Olson. We'll check with FCSS on their intakes. I know ours are set in policy, but we could bring that back to council.
Okay, so just a motion and to accept the community grants report as information. Councilor Auld? All in favor of that motion? Carried. Okay, do we have any administrative inquiries? Councilor Alderson?
Yeah, administrative inquiries. Just based on maybe how we can better secure this for all the HS guidelines. Are we going to be looking into maybe potentially higher plastic barriers, things like that?
Your Worship, we kind of just accepted them with Alberta Health Services, saying they should be higher, or well, they could be higher, not should, could be higher. They'd be more happy with them being higher. So if council directs us, we can look at that.
What was their reasoning for being higher? That kind of surprised me. Do they think that we're really tall?
Yes.
Oh, for real? Is that what it is? Because I would have thought they would have wanted further back that way.
Your Worship, maybe I'll have Ms. Budden answer because she's the one who talked to Alberta Health Services.
I had a couple of conversations with our local public health inspector yesterday. she had reviewed a video and photos. She was concerned that some people, when I'm looking at you, Councillor Ald's heads were very close to the top of the barrier. However, upon further review and in consultation with her manager, they said actually in relation to where your mouth is, in relation to the barrier when you're seated, it would be enough to capture those large droplets, which is what they are most concerned about, provided we're wearing masks otherwise, and there's lots of sanitizer available, and everybody is staying home when they're sick, and all of that. So although she said it could be higher, ideally it would be. If we're following all the rules here, then it would be fine. And she was happy to hear it did hang out over the edge. It wasn't obvious on the video, but we measured them and sent her the dimensions and her final callback. I don't know if I sent Dean a summary of our conversation. Did you pass it along to council?
Yes, you did.
Okay, so you've seen it all as well.
Yeah.
That was, we're good to proceed here in chambers in the setup that we do.
Well, we're fine. If not, I'm wondering maybe if rather than whole new barriers, I don't know if it's just possible to get an extension on these things that could be clipped together, or I don't know, start to save on cost. But
We talked about turning them upright, but then of course we lose the extension.
Okay. Is everybody good with that, or?
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's a fairly fluid situation as well. We may have to, you know, who knows what's happening. Just be willing to change on a dime. Any other administrative inquiries? I'm just going to follow up with the suicide awareness. I'm just wondering if we could follow up and find out, make sure those numbers are on our website, our Facebook page, or whatever we have to have, just so that people that need the supports have access to them. I don't know what else we can do. We can put them out wherever we possibly can. Councillor Fraser?
I just had an administrative inquiry about the big Christmas tree, and I remember we kind of talked about it last year, and there was a donation, and then the company either didn't exist or the donation ended. I'm just wondering if that's something, because the parade has been canceled, I don't even know if there's enough time to do something like that, but there were some questions about the large tree that used to be in the brick parking lot and how it was kind of a great beacon for the community, and I'm curious if we know if it used to be donated by a company and now that company is unable to do that, or I guess what the story with the big tree is, and if it's possible to get it back if that's what we want.
So I can take a stab at that. I believe there was a donation at one time, and it was called a diversity tree at the start, and there was a grant, and I believe it was through ACES, an ACES grant.
The Active Community.
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
FCSS was heavily involved with the initial.
Correct. And it was mainly so that, you know, diversification of our community, and you could go and you could hang a wreath on there that was of your culture, or, you know, whatever. And there was a big lighting of the tree at the Parade of Lights. I just don't know this year. We don't want to promote gathering. And so personally, I think maybe next year bring it back if possible.
Just along the lines of that tree, since there's not currently donations for a tree, especially of that size, just wondering if we, in the future, could consider looking to get an artificial one made that can be reused year after year after year, where we actually save costs. We don't necessarily need a donation of a tree, and then it would just be something that we put up each year during the season. But I like the idea still of keeping it like a cultural tree, although like maybe not during COVID times. That people would be hanging anything on it, but that'd be something to consider anyhow.
Maybe bring that back next year.
Yeah, we're sure we can look into it and bring it back.
People do miss it, that's true. They do. You do hear about it a lot. It's beautiful.
Any other administrative inquiries? Are you okay with that, Councillor Fraser?
Yes, I see it a lot. People are saying, where did the tree go?
Okay. Do we have any notices of motion? Seeing none. It is 2:56, and I will just call a 3-minute break just to allow the cameras off, and then we will come back in and go into closed session.